Welcome to Dice of Wrath. My name is Joe, and today we're going to look at the 2022 Holiday Buying Guide. As you know, the holiday season is upon us, and this is a list that could be useful for those who have people that are into board games or want to get into board games. This may help you decide what to purchase for them. Most of these items are in stock or should be easily available. There's a couple that are potentially just from the publishers themselves. I will let you know about those when I get to those. Our first category is two-player only game, and for that I recommend Shobu. This is an abstract game in which you have four boards in front of you of different colors, two different colors I should say. You have four stones of your own color on each of these boards. Your goal is to push off the opponent's stones off of one of those boards. To do this, you move one of your stones up to two spaces on one colored board, and then the other side, the other colored boards, you move the exact same movement, different stone, and on that board you can push the opponent's stones off. Doing this is how you win the game. Now I do have a review of this, but this is a great two-player game. It's pretty easy to learn, but it's deceptively deep, and if you have someone that you game with all the time, I really recommend this game as a two-player only game. Now let's say you're looking for a card game. Well, one of the ones I recommend for more than just two or more, I should say, is Arboretum. Now this is one of the original versions. The new versions do have a different coloring and item that looks different, but in this game you get a hand of cards of different suits, and the suits are all different types of trees. And on your turn you're going to place a tree down in your tableau, and your goal is to make a path of like trees in ascending order. The more you have in a row, the higher the points are for the game, for that particular tree. The problem is you can only score that tree, or one player gets to score that tree. Whoever that player is determined by whoever has the highest number of that type of tree cards still in their hand at the end of the game. So if you may put out 6 cards in a row on your tableau, but someone else has a higher remaining card in their hand, you may not get to score that run of trees at all. This becomes very thinky, because what happens is you're trying to decide, do I put this card down in front of me, or do I discard this because I need to draw a different card, because you only have a certain amount of cards in your hand. And the discard pile is one that the other opponents can draw from. Because of this, what you're putting down could be used against you and could cause your own ruin in this game. But you've got that constant struggle of holding on to something good, or using it in front of you, or holding on to something that you know someone else needs, which just clogs the space in your hand up. This is a really great thinking game. Again, that's Arboretum. Now the next game is another card game. However, this one, it appears when you play it that every card is broken. This is called Innovation. And in this game, you get a certain hand of cards, of course, but the goal is there's groups or piles of different eras of cards, different innovations, hence the title, different years throughout history. Each of these cards, when played in front of you, can give you special powers that let you draw other cards or attack other people's cards, or do things such as moving cards as one direction or another in the hand on your tableau in front of you. This increases your power of those particular cards. There's a lot of combo cards in this. However, these cards are very powerful and can easily get broke by another card in another player's hand. Something that you've been using for 4 or 5 turns in a row, with the flick of one card on the other opponent's hand, is totally destroyed. And because of this, it can be mean, but if you know going into that this is the case, it's an incredibly combo crazy game, and finding out how these little things work together, it's remarkable on how just 2 little decks of cards can do this. Anyway, that's called Innovation. Now let's say you are more of a party game player. You got a lot of people and you don't know what to play. Well, this is one that I recommend called Just One. And the way this game works is you are given a little whiteboard in front of you that you write a clue on. This clue is for a randomly chosen word from a deck of cards, and one player out of the group has to guess what this hidden word is. All the other players know what it is, and you're the ones writing this word down. These clues, when they are shown to the player that's guessing, if any of those clues match, those ones can't be shown to that guesser. So for instance, if you had the Enterprise as the clue, as the word, someone may put Kirk on one clue, another person may say Spock, but if two people put Spock, the clues that say Spock are eliminated, so only the Kirk clue is shown. So in this instance, what you're trying to do is write down a clue that will help the person guessing the word get the answer, but you don't want it to necessarily be so obvious that other people will write down the same word, because if you do so, you're going to limit the number of guesses that, or not guesses, but the number of clues that the guesser gets. And so this is a very good game. You have to guess so many cards right to win the game, but basically, like a lot of party games, you can just play this till you're done, but it is a great icebreaker. You learn how other people are thinking as you're trying to get to know them and figure out what they might know that someone else may not guess, etc. But that's called Just One. Now let's say you like trivia, and those who like trivia usually really like trivia, but let's say you're not good at trivia. Well, that's okay. You don't have to be for this game, and that's called Wits and Wagers. Now, this is the Vegas version, but there are other versions you can get. And the way this works is that there's one question asked, and let's say it's how many Pringles are in a can? Everyone makes a guess. They write this down, and then everyone flips over the guesses. Then, the part that helps those who do not like trivia out, if everyone guesses on which of those answers is the most likely to be correct. So when this happens, everyone gets a more fair chance to potentially get the right answer. Those who have the closest to being the correct answer get a bonus, and there are odds depending on the number of answers there are as far as the points that you get at the end. In the Vegas version, you get money depending on what you bet on, and there's a little more gambling feel to it. However, the points are in the other games, it's very similar. The main thing about this is the questions that are asked are not generally ones that most people know the answer to, or at least it's pretty hard to know the answer to. It can't happen. Even if they do know this, people can still guess as to, or bet on the ones they think is correct, so they have a chance of winning, even if they are behind or are horrible at trivia. So this is very good for that. This is called Wits and Wagers. Now let's say you want a more family type of game, something that's maybe it's not beginner, we'll say, it's a little bit more than that. This one I would recommend is Quacks of Quedlinburg. Now in Quacks, what happens is on your turn, you have a bag of chips in your possession. You pull out these chips and they're placed in a potion board in front of you. Now it's a push your luck game, and as such, when you have so many of a certain color of chip, your potion explodes. Now this causes problems. You may not get as much money, you may not be able to buy as many chips, or have a limited points from that. At the end of the round, you buy more chips. These chips may move a certain amount of spaces, they have different powers, but the main thing on this is it's very easy to learn how this mechanic works. And you can scale the difficulty by choosing what the powers are for each of these type of chips. There's basically 4 different types for every kind of chip. So if you want a little more harder game, a little more luckier version, you can adjust that accordingly with the type of chips or powers that these chips do. And because of that, I think this is an easy game to learn and upgrade as you go, depending on what your style of play is. And of course, there's more expansions you can always add to it for more complexity. And so I think that's a great game to start with, and that's called Quacks of Quedlinburg. Now the next category is 5 or 6 player game. I've got 1, maybe 2 for this one. Usually for us, we just are a 2-player household for the most part, or solo player, and so we don't break these out very often. So the first one I have plays up to 5, and that's this little small card game called No Thanks. And what happens is your goal in this is to have the lowest score in the game. What happens is there's a card placed in front of you, and on your turn you have so many of these little chips to bet with. If you do not want the card, you put a chip onto that card and it goes to the next player. The next player gets to choose whether or not they put a chip on that card or take the card and any chips that are on it. The chips are minus points at the end of the game for those that you have in your hand, which is good. However, you do score whatever the card number is that you have. So as the cards get higher, so is the amount of points you're going to have. Now the thing about this is that if you get cards in a row, you only score the lowest card. So for instance, if you have a 15, 16, and 17, you're going to only score 15 points. So you obviously want to get the cards that are in a row for you, and that helps you out as opposed to other players. If there is a break though, you do not get that. So for instance, 15, 16, and then 18, you would have 15 points plus 18 points because you had that missing card. That missing 17 was not there. So it becomes a guess as to, or a pressure luck almost, because you're trying to decide, should I take this card, or do I wait for it to maybe go around so there's more chips on it? The number of chips will help me either buy more cards later or skip cards later, or just negative points at the end. The other thing about this is that every game, there's certain cards that are left out of the deck. So you never know what card that is going to be. So there's always a chance that that run you're working on won't ever be complete because it's missing out of the game. But it's a small game and it works well for 5 players, even down to 3 it says. But that's called No Thanks. This is an older version. There's a newer one with a little more updated graphics. Now going from that, we go to another one that I would say is good for up to 6 people, but I consider this one of the meanest games I have, and this one is called Survive, Escape from Atlantis. And what this is in the game you have, or there is I should say, a volcano that's erupting. And every turn, a little piece of tile or a piece of island, which is a tile, is removed from the board or flipped over. The thing about it is you have meeples on these island tiles. Your goal is to get the meeples from these tiles to the edge of the board where they're safe. Along the way, you get into these rafts with yourself or other meeples from other players. But in the water, there are sharks that can eat your meeples. There are whales that can capsize the boat. With the expansions for 5 and 6 players as well, there's squids, and there's dolphins, and there's sea serpents, which I think are in the base game actually, but the other 2 are not. With those, you can play up to 6 people. The thing about it is the meeples on the bottom of them have a number between 1 and 6. So the score you get depends on which meeples you get to the shore. However, this is very cutthroat, as you may sink your own boat because other people have higher point meeples on it. On your turn, you move like a whale or a creature of some sort, or one of those will move randomly determined by a die, but you're the one who moves how far that is and which one it is. So you could capsize your own boat for better points. Even though it's fun, you got to make sure you have the right crowd for this, because if they are not aware of how cutthroat this is, you may have some very upset gamers. Now the next game is a cooperative game. Let's say you don't like to compete against other people, and cooperative games are one way to do that. This particular one is not a light game. It's a little more difficult to learn, and it has a ton of depth. And that is called Spirit Island. Here. And with this, you are spirits on this island that is trying to ward off foreign invaders. And over time, they will build towns and cities which will damage the land. And your goal is to get them all off. You do this with various powers that you have to start with, and you gain more as the game goes on. At first, it seems overwhelming. There's going to be so many invaders coming in, and you have to take care of them slowly over time as your spirit builds up in strength, because they're very weak when they start. So a lot of fires to put out at the beginning, and eventually you become so powerful that you can wipe them out. But this does take a lot of planning, and there's a lot of cooperation between every player at the board. If you're interested in a really deep cooperative game, this is a great one called Spirit Island. Now, speaking of heavy games, the next one I have is a competitive game. It's worker placement and heavy. You may have this for someone who's getting further along in the gaming arena, we'll say. But this is called Anachrony. It's the future, and time travel has happened. You're trying to get your particular portion or faction of civilization to become the rulers of the new future, because you have found out that there's going to be another catastrophic event that's going to destroy the world. And so your path, as they call it, is the one that, if they win, will guide civilization into the future. To do this, there's all sorts of tokens, resources. You use these little mechs to do certain things and go certain areas. But there's a lot to the game. There's a lot of symbology, and it can be easy to, with enough time, it can become secondhand. As you get more expansions or different versions, you can adjust the difficulty to your specifics, which can definitely help on the learning process of this game. It does have a solo mode that you can get. I do recommend that, but this is called Anachrony. Now, the next game on this stack, or the last game on this stack, I'll say, is for legacy games. Let's say you want to play something that changes every game, and this is definitely one of them. This one I recommend is Pandemic Legacy. There's a couple seasons of this. I recommend them all, 1, 2, and 0. Basically takes the basic Pandemic game, cooperative game. This is a cooperative legacy game. And as you play it, things will change. You may make changes to the board. You may apply stickers. You may tear things up or not use things. The characters that you start with will change, and different powers will be added. And it's a great progressive game. Now, you do have to have a commitment from players, which can be an issue. And if you do not like Pandemic, you may not like this particular thing. It may not change your mind. However, I think if you've never played Pandemic, if you got season 1, you can play the base version of that without any changes. And it's base Pandemic. So you could learn from that, and if you like that, proceed with the legacy portion of it. However, if you've played Pandemic and you like it, and for some reason you've never played Legacy, I do recommend it. I would start with number 1, that's closest to base, and from there you can progress as you decide to. It does have a story for each of these, and that's Pandemic Legacy. Okay, so let's say heavy's not your thing. You want something a little bit lighter, but you're beyond the beginner phases of stuff. Then let's look at this one, Dune Imperium. Now, this is based off of the, well, it's not based, but it's the IP from the movie that was recently released. And in this is a semi-deck builder, worker placement with a little bit of combat. But the way this works is you're trying to get a certain amount of points, and you do this by areas that you control on the board and using the cards that you have in your hand to get those. There's a lot of potential interaction between the players, and due to the different mechanics in this, it's not something I would recommend for starters, but it's probably not too advanced. You could get this, but it would be considered more of a midweight game. There's different expansions available, but I think that if you have an inkling or you enjoy the IP, you'll enjoy this game. And if you like a little bit of card or deck building, you'll enjoy this. Anyway, that's Dune Imperium, and there are a couple expansions available for it as well. Now, let's go a little more classic. This is a game that has been around for a while now and easily considered a classic. Most people probably have this, but if you don't, or if you want to gift it to somebody getting into the hobby, this is Ticket to Ride, and this is the European version. The way it works is every round you pick 2 cards from your hand, or I'm sorry, you draw up to 2 cards, or you can place trains down on the map. There's multiple different maps that you can get. This one's specifically Europe. It's a route building. You're trying to get from one area to another on the map that you have. You're given cards that give you certain points if you complete these routes, and if you don't, you get a minus. So you may have only limited routes between certain areas. So the first person who takes that then creates a bottleneck for everyone else, and they have to work their routes around that city in a different manner to connect. This is where the interaction is. And it can be a little cutthroat at times if you know what people are going for. And it depends on the map as well. Some maps have extra options to make that easier. Some are a little more cutthroat or smaller spaces for lower player counts. So it's a great one to expand, and you've got multiple options depending on your play style. But that's Ticket to Ride, classic game. Now the next category I don't play too much of. We've got a couple, but that's roll and writes, which are very popular nowadays. And the one that I really like is Long Shot. This game, which I think is just at Barnes & Noble currently, but the way it works is that on every turn you've got a racetrack of horses. You roll the dice and a certain horse will go so many spaces. However, there's a list of these horses that have numbers on a card for that horse. Once that horse has been rolled, these other horses move as well. Now the roll and write part of it comes in is that you have your own kind of scorecard, and you can bet on a horse. You can do certain actions which may cause horses to move forward when it's when a different horse is rolled. You can cause the horses to just move forward or backwards. You can buy horses, and so if they are the first ones to cross the finish line, you get a bonus. If or second or third, etc. But it's a really good roll and write game that doesn't necessarily feel like a lot of the others, but there is a lot of luck, so just be aware of that. But I enjoy it. Long Shot, the dice game. Now let's say you're looking for a solo only game. I know there's a lot of solo players out there, and many of them, if you are one, probably has already heard about this. However, one that I play that is just solo, well, it says it for up to 2 players, but really it's for solo. It's called Nemo's War. And in this game, you are Captain Nemo, and you're trying to run the Nautilus through so many turns through like a deck of cards, kind of plot cards of things that happen to you along the way, events that go through. A lot are taken from the actual stories. Along the way, what you're trying to do is either sink ships or capture ships, and you're moving along a map, and you're trying to keep the ships from clogging up certain areas because they're going to capture you, and basically they're looking for you. And so by destroying them or capturing them, you can increase or empty out some of these spaces. The benefits of doing this depend upon the type of captain you are, which you get to choose at the beginning of the game, and you may be able to switch that midway through. Maybe you're more warlike, and so you get bonuses when you're attacking and sinking ships as opposed to capturing them. Maybe you're more technologically minded, and so you try to upgrade your Nautilus with bonuses that will help you roll or get better results. There is a lot of rolling in this game. You do have ways to mitigate it, but once it starts to go bad, it can go really bad fast. However, if you're looking for a solo game with very thematic ties to it, it's a little bit off the beaten path, I would say Nemo's War is the one for you. Now let's say you're looking for a solo game that has more expandability, or let's say you're into living card games, or you want to get into those. Something that you can add, just at your convenience to upgrade it as you go. Well, the one I would recommend currently is called Marvel Champions. Now, this is based off of the Lord of the Rings card game and Arkham Horror, the card game. And basically what it is you have picked a superhero, one of the Marvel superheroes, and basically you have a deck of cards based upon that hero, and you have kind of aspects of a type of hero, like you may be more protective, or you may be more of the leader or aggressive type of hero. Those cards can get kind of shuffled in and out, but you add that to specific ones from your character. Now, what you're trying to do is beat a particular villain. The base game comes with 6 different heroes, 3 different villains, I believe. But there are so many expansions to this. And it's something that if you just want to buy a deck of a certain hero and just go, you can. But you can also tear these apart. You can adjust them to your liking, tweak them however much as you like. So you can spend as much or as little time as you want getting the deck right before you even play. And a lot of people can enjoy that, but if you don't, and you can, like I said, just get the hero you want, play against the villain you like, and boom, you've got a great game. But again, that's Marvel Champions, the living card game, and if you don't like money, feel free to get into that because it'll eat it up. The next game is probably, I would say, a very thematic game. This one you can get from the publisher, Kayenta Games, sorry. But this is called Obsession. And this one is you are playing a Victorian heir or Victorian family, and you're trying to increase your reputation because it's fallen on hard times. With that, you're trying to gain the hand or get someone married into your family, particular Fairchild children. Doing this will, increase your standing and let you potentially win the game. To do this though, it's a tableau builder. You're building your estate in front of you, and each of these has different guests that may need to run this, or different requirements of your staff. The way this works though is it starts out pretty straightforward. Everyone starts the same stuff or very close to the same stuff, and you can build it out as you see fit depending on what you want to focus on. Maybe you focus on a lot of guests. Hopefully they give you good points for that and not necessarily bad things. There's a lot of luck in it, but you can mitigate it with some strategic planning. But it's very thematic. Every rule in here has a reason for it thematically, as far as why this is or why this particular tile does this, as far as the style of event in your tableau. I do have a review of this. Feel free to take a look at that. But that's called Obsession. And if you're looking for a very thematic game, worker placement, but more tableau building, not a lot of take that, then take a look at this Obsession. Now, what do you get for the gamer who's got everything? Well, we've got some ideas for that as well. A lot of gamers need organizational help because we're addicts and we buy too many games, or we're very OCD and we like our games organized in certain ways. But a lot of the issues comes with we want to get the game set up quicker and we want to put it away quicker, because the quicker we can do that, the quicker we can get to another game. And so a lot of these things can help with that kind of setup. Maybe you've got a small table. You don't have enough room to have these giant games laid out. Some of these things will help with that. One of the things we like to use are, maybe it's like you want to protect your games. These are card covers, or card sleeves is what they're really called. Basically, you put these on your cards. It'll help keep them from getting worn down. If you play it a lot, or let's say you just have a really expensive game, or your friend has an expensive game that you don't want them to get ruined, because they can be hard to get sometimes. So you can protect them with that. Card sleeves are always great, and that's something that I use on some of my games. One thing I like to do with small table space, I've got some different card holders. This is like a wooden card holder. You can stick your cards in here, so you can just hold them in front of you. My wife likes to use this quite a bit because she has carpal tunnel, and so using the card holder like that can really help with her wrists. But that can make it easy if you're running low in space or you're a solo player. You can put your cards up there, not take up as much board space. Or let's say you're playing something big like Eldritch Horror, or something with a lot of decks of cards. Something big like this can hold multiple sets of cards and a little bit of space. You don't have to have them spread out all over your table. You can stack them up in here, and this is a great space saver. It helps you out if you got smaller tables. Another thing that I like to use are upgrades to pieces. Let's say, some of my favorite games, I like to get upgrades. Like this is for Ticket to Ride. There's a little different trains for the similar color. You can spend a lot of money on just upgrading stuff instead. So let's say you got a gamer who likes a particular game. Maybe you buy some special components for it, and that will increase the value for it without having to get a whole nother game. Another thing that you can do, which is you can get an expansion. This one here is like for Nemo's War. It's just some extra small little cards to get for this, and you put that in there, and you can get from small to giant games like Marvel Champions I was talking about. You can expand that out immensely with new decks of cards. So those are ways that we like to do to increase the the way that things are organized. One other one that I like to use on my games are these little cups, little Jello cups, serving cups, but just get a stack of these. You can put little bits in them. It may not seem like much, but it really can help speed packaging up of your games. And when it comes to that, that's worth the price of admission. So that's some extra ideas for things you can get your gamer friends that may have everything already. Just some extra organizational things. Maybe they like paints for miniatures. You can get them paints. Everyone will take paints if they like them. They'll find a use for them, believe me. So, things like that will help the game and help you with your board gamer friend. And hopefully those gives you some ideas. So this has been Dice of Wrath. That's the 2022 buyer's guide, or holiday guide, I should say. If you have some suggestions, put them down in the comments. Anyway, my name is Joe, and we'll see you the next time.